Nichiren Daishonin refused to let religious practice retreat into blind, subjective mysticism. He demanded verification, refusing to rely on raw emotion. For the advanced practitioner who has chanted for years, the question of whether chanting Namu-Myoho-Renge-Kyo actually works is often clouded by a deep psychological trap. We're taught that every obstacle is a devil to overcome, and every positive event is direct proof of our faith. But if every possible outcome, success or failure, is explained away after the fact, the entire system becomes a closed, unfalsifiable circle. It begins to feel less like a cosmic law of life and more like a simple placebo. To resolve this deep-seated doubt, we must look to the rigorous logic of Nichiren's original Sado letters. He did not demand blind devotion or emotional reassurance. He offered a systematic, logical epistemology to test the truth of his own practice. He established the 3 proofs, or sancho, to judge the validity of any spiritual teaching and religious claim. In his 1275 letter, 3 Tripitaka Masters Pray for Rain, he laid out these specific criteria. Nichiren wrote, "In judging the relative merit of Buddhist teachings, I used the 3 standards of documentary proof, theoretical proof, and actual proof. The best standards are those of reason and documentary proof, and even more valuable than those is the proof of actual fact. Observe the hierarchy. Documentary proof evaluates whether the fundamental texts make a lucid case for its eminence. Every word must be grounded in scripture. Theoretical proof tests whether the teachings reasonably clarify the mysteries of life and death, aligning with logic and the natural laws of cause and effect. But actual proof, meaning observable results in the daily life of practitioners, is the ultimate standard, valued above all else. Why? Because a teaching can have scriptural backing and sound logic, but if it fails to manifest observable change in your reality, it is useless. Yet, how do we distinguish true actual proof from mere self-affirmation, positive thinking, or a simple self-fulfilling psychological loop? To answer this, we must examine the classical roots of this system and why your hardest challenges are the key to validation. To understand the deep historical roots of the 3 proofs, we must realize that Nichiren Daishonin did not invent this system from thin air. Instead, he adapted a highly sophisticated, centuries-old epistemological system of logic, known in classical Indian philosophy as the science of pramana. In the great Buddhist monastic universities like Nalanda, ancient philosophers spent their entire lifetimes debating how a person could distinguish truth from delusion. They developed these rigorous logical rules to protect the Buddhist teachings from falling into subjective, unfalsifiable mysticism and irrational, blind guru worship. This classical Indian logical framework was imported to Japan through Vasubandhu's monumental 4th century philosophical treatise, the Abhidharma-Kosapasya. When we translate Nichiren's 3 proofs back into their original Sanskrit concepts, their highly scientific and empirical nature becomes immediately undeniable. Documentary proof, or bunsho, corresponds to sabda, the reliance on the scriptural testimony of reliable historical experts and foundational sacred texts. Theoretical proof, or risho, is indeed anumana, the strict, systematic application of logical deduction, reason, and internal consistency. If a spiritual doctrine contradicts itself or directly violates the observable laws of the physical universe, it immediately fails this test of risho. Actual proof, or gensho, is pratyaksha, which means unmediated sensory observation of reality through personal experience and direct mental perception. Nichiren stood firmly upon this rich classical Indian heritage to wage a fierce, uncompromising intellectual war against the popular Buddhist sects of his time. His primary target was Honen's popular Pure Land school, which demanded absolute, exclusive, and blind reliance on the Nembutsu recitation. Honen taught that ordinary practitioners must completely abandon their own capacity for reason and rely entirely on the grace of Amida Buddha. This was a theology of pure, passive, post-mortem escape, promising rebirth in a distant Western paradise after a person's physical death. But Nichiren countered that true, valid Buddhist practice must remain strictly accountable to logical coherence and empirical verification in this present world. He demanded that a valid teaching must produce observable, positive, and physical transformation in both the practitioner's daily life and society. Yet this rigorous requirement opens a dangerous, painful pitfall for the practitioner. What happens when your daily reality becomes a storm of unexpected suffering? Modern, consumer-facing Buddhist organizations largely sanitized the deep historical relationship between actual proof and physical suffering. Official Soka study materials often define Gensho almost exclusively as subjective comfort, socioeconomic success, and emotional peace. This popular lay framing presents actual proof as a simple, incremental ladder of personal breakthroughs, like landing a promotion or securing stable housing. But this lay interpretation leads to a devastating logical contradiction. If material comfort is the premier proof of correct practice, then Nichiren was a complete failure. During the medieval Kamakura period, the established, corrupt high priests colluded with the military shogunate, living in luxury and peace. Meanwhile, Nichiren Daishonin was attacked, dragged to the Tatsuno-Kuchi execution beach, and banished to the brutal, frozen wilderness of Sado Island. If material comfort indicates correct practice, the shogunate leaders who actively persecuted him possessed the true, actual proof of Buddhism. To resolve this deep paradox, we must realize that Nichiren defined actual proof precisely by the presence of his physical suffering. His painful exiles on Sado Island were his ultimate empirical evidence because they fulfilled the literal, severe prophecies of the Lotus Sutra. The 13th chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Encouraging Devotion, explicitly predicts that the true teacher in the latter day of the law will face hatred, slander, and banishment. Because the established high priests of his era lived in luxury, they could not be the true votaries of the sutra. By enduring these severe trials, Nichiren Daishonin proved that he was physically reading the Lotus Sutra with his own body. This critical hermeneutical concept of Hokke Shikidoku is the ultimate objective standard of spiritual validation. While his rivals chose quiet, comfortable submission to the state authorities, Nichiren actively stood his ground, choosing the path of Fujishaku Shinyo. This Sanskrit-derived concept means to not begrudge one's physical life when confronting corrupt, established secular authority to protect the integrity of the Dharma. His brutal exiles were not passive tragedies. They were active, empirical demonstrations that he had activated the universal laws of the Lotus Sutra. Yet Nichiren's public standard of actual proof went far beyond personal exiles. It extended to a public meteorological test of nature itself. To fully dismantle the placebo critique, we must realize that medieval actual proof was never a private, subjective feeling of personal wellness, peace, or personal convenience. Nichiren Daishonin did not accept simple personal coincidences or subjective emotional feelings as valid validation of the Lotus Sutra's truth. Instead, he demanded a rigorous, public test of spiritual efficacy that could be directly observed and verified by the entire state of Japan. The definitive battleground for this test was the drought of 1271, which threatened the Japanese nation with severe famine. The Kamakura shogunate commissioned the esteemed, politically powerful Shingon esoteric master, Ryokan, to pray for rain to end this crisis. Nichiren publicly challenged him, proposing that if Ryokan produced rain within 7 days, Nichiren would become his disciple. But if Ryokan failed, he must publicly admit the falsity of his esoteric Shingon teachings and submit to Nichiren's logic. Ryokan accepted this challenge, gathered hundreds of disciples at the temple, and initiated elaborate, secret rituals to summon water. Yet 7 days passed, and not a single drop of rain fell. Desperate, Ryokan requested a second 7-day extension. Instead of rain, Kamakura was struck by devastating windstorms, floods, and political chaos, destroying the crops and city infrastructure entirely. Nichiren analyzed this public failure in his letter, 3 Tripitaka Masters Pray for Rain, written from the Minobu Valley to Mishiyama Nyudo. He carefully examined the historical records of the 3 great Shingon esoteric masters in ancient China, Subhakara Simha, Vajrabodra, and Amoga Vajra. Nichiren noted that while they claimed to produce rain in ancient China, their esoteric rituals unleashed devastating floods and violent gales. He concluded that their prayers produced these adverse effects because their esoteric Shingon doctrines distorted the core teachings of the Lotus Sutra. In this monumental treatise, Nichiren argued that actual proof was not merely a subjective feeling of personal wellness or a simple coincidence. It was a rigorous, public, and objective test of efficacy where spiritual authority was directly validated by its physical, observable impact on the land. This public validation brings us back to your own daily life. How do you transition from expecting a transactional miracle to forging your own proof? Everything you need to go deeper is at NMRKOB.com, or follow the link in the description or pinned comment. This public, rigorous history brings us directly to the ultimate, final resolution of the placebo paradox in your own daily practice. When your chanting feels empty, or when unexpected obstacles arise in your life, you are not experiencing a failure of Buddhism. Instead, you are standing in the exact historical crucible where your theoretical understanding is forged into observable, physical resilience. Actual proof is never about expecting a transactional, magical reply from the universe to solve your problems without any personal effort. Instead, it means that your daily life becomes the physical document where the supreme validity of the Lotus Sutra is proven. By chanting Namu-Myoho-Renge-Kyo in the absolute middle of financial, physical, or relational storms, you are physically reading the sutra with your body. You are proving that the inherent dignity of your Buddhahood is entirely independent of your external, changing circumstances. This is the true, actual proof that Nichiren Daishonin demanded. The manifest power to repurpose Sado Island into the raw fuel for your forge. Your painful obstacles are not indicators of ritual mistakes or failures. They are the friction that validates your correct direction. To support you in this daily forge, we provide the ultimate practical doctrinal toolkits on our supporter website every single week of the year. The harsh, snowy Sado exiles generated Nichiren's most profound, raw letters, where he debated the precise boundaries of logic and proof. These historical proof arguments, written directly from his snowy exiles on Sado, are now available exclusively for our dedicated members. By joining the Vow Keeper Supporter tier at $15 a month, you secure instant, unlimited access to these weekly translated goshos. You also receive our comprehensive bridge ebook, One Moment Contains Everything, detailing the deep spiritual physics of your daily, consistent daimoku. This is the physical infrastructure that keeps this independent spiritual library alive for the next practitioner facing their own severe trials. Stop waiting for a transactional, magical miracle to verify your practice, and start building your own actual proof today in your life. Your Sado Island is waiting for you. Go to the link in the description below to sign in and begin your journey today.